Okay, we are live right now with Coach John Danowski, and welcome to the Elevate Academy. So the Elevate Academy, we started this as a place for student athletes, their parents, their families, really anyone who's a lover of sports, because it's not just about lacrosse, it's anything. It's all about being the best student athlete that you can be. And we're trying to focus on a bunch of different things. Our focus has always been on mind, body, game, and life. And today we bring one of the best coaches in lacrosse, one of the best people in lacrosse to the Elevated Academy. So I'd like to welcome Coach John Danowski. Coach D, welcome.
Dave, thanks very much, man. This is exciting. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, just so everyone knows, Coach D he literally had to go to backup plan here. You're in Durham?
I'm in Durham, yep.
He's in Durham and they have no power. So.
Yep, storm came through this morning, and so I've been working on some stuff here on my laptop, which doesn't require, internet. And but through the beauty of modern technology, we're able to do this by way of phone.
I love it. It's awesome. So for those people because we have fans on here that are from all different sports, and so let me just give a little bit of a background. Coach Danowski took over the Duke program in 2007, was his first full season, won 3 national championships in 2010 and back-to-back in 2013 and 2014. And then in 2018, led Team USA to a World Championships in an unbelievable 9-8 game over Canada. So when we say we literally have one of the best there is, this is one of the best there is. So, Coach, let's get into a little bit of lacrosse here, obviously, because it's something we love. But let's go back to the roots. The one thing that you and I both have in common is we are from the same hometown, East Meadow on Long Island. And I want you to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in East Meadow, real blue collar town, and then going on to Rutgers from there.
Well, it's funny, when you kind of reflect on your philosophies or, why you believe in what you believe in, your core values, so much of it is rooted in growing up during the time that we did, during the 60s and 70s on Long Island. And you're right, it was a blue collar town. Nobody's moms worked, one car, you had one television, and it was great. It was, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. Our teachers were our coaches in junior high, and in high school. You went down to the street, you went down to the local, school, whether it was the elementary school or the junior high, to play baseball in the summer, and we kid around, but, that's where we learned leadership. The older kids taught us how to lead. You chose sides. The 2 biggest guys have to be on the opposite teams, to make it fair.
Exactly.
We don't have enough guys to play, 9 against 9 in baseball. So we used to run the bases backwards because everybody was right-handed. Second base was the foul pole, third base was the foul pole, and you self-hit, but you had to only keep it on the right side of the field. The left side of the diamond. In order to make it fair. I don't know who created that, who invented that, but that's how we played. In football, it was, the older guys were the leaders, quote, the captains, the quarterbacks, and, they would teach us exactly how to play. You take 4 steps, stop, turn to the outside, and I'll throw you the ball.
Yeah.
They had to engage the younger kids, because if the younger kids didn't get a pass thrown their way every once in a while, they'd quit. And then you wouldn't have enough guys to have an even game. So, I think, we learned so much on the street, whether it was playing touch football or playing baseball in the summer, or going down to Prospect Park and spending all our summers playing basketball.
Prospect Park, for those people who aren't familiar, Prospect Park literally was the epicenter of basketball on Long Island during the summers. It literally was a who's who of the best players on Long Island. And, I grew up really good friends. One of my really good friends, John Daugherty, his brother was Matt Daugherty, went on to Carolina, became the coach of Carolina. And when he was there at Carolina, they won that first national championship with Michael Jordan. And I just remember going down and watching John Daugherty play basketball and at Prospect Park. And you were literally watching an NBA game.
You can drop names like Tom Riker, who was a first-round draft choice of the New York Knicks. Kevin Joyce, played at Archbishop Malloy. He was from Merrick. He was the captain of the '72 Olympic team that got robbed of the gold medal against the Russians. That really famous controversial game. Kevin was down there all the time. Bill Kunze, who played at Lutheran. Rick Pitino actually played at Prospect Park. So I mean,
who was the big redhead? Who was the big redhead that he was a center at Notre Dame? I remember seeing him too.
Tim Kempton.
Tim Kempton. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Tim Kempton, and I mean, so that was the place where we used to get there at 6:30 because the good players started arriving at 7. And so what happened was that I love playing basketball, and they would pick you because there was nobody left to play, right? At 6:30, and if you got on a good team and you won, you kept playing because it was winners out.
You had to run.
But if you lost, you were guys like me, I was done for the night. But I would show up about 6:30 so I could get on a team. And I remember one time Kevin Joyce yelling at me not to shoot, to shoot the ball because I had a wide open shot, but I was deferring to all these great players. And, he taught me, you have the shot, you take it. And, the lessons that we learned growing up there, have lasted a lifetime.
Oh yeah. And we used to freeze over the courts in the winter, and then we would play hockey. We'd play ice hockey on the courts in the winter.
Tennis courts. Yeah.
And that's what it was. And, you talk about playing in the street. Matt Daugherty's brother, John Daugherty, went out for a pass, and he did it down and out, and he was out. He ran full speed into a telephone pole and knocked himself out, but no one went and grabbed any parents or anything. We just got him up. You okay? I think so. Okay, let's get back in the huddle. We're down at touchdown. Let's go.
It's different times for sure.
Absolutely. But, growing up on Long Island for me, I'm in the process right now writing a book, and the book that I'm writing, it's called Sports Saved My Life. And John Durante was my gym coach in East Meadow, and the famous coach there. And Coach D was another one who literally he helped change my life and put me on the right path because he saw something in you. And that's one of the beautiful things about being a coach is you get to help young men and women be the best they can be. And you're doing that literally every day now. Well, you've been doing it for a long time. I mean, you did it at Hofstra, you did it at LAU Post prior, but now on this big stage at Duke, what's it like to literally change kids' lives?
I think one of the things that I learned from my dad, and my dad was a junior high phys ed teacher, when I was growing up, and my brother was a history teacher at Seaford High School. I learned that you don't know the effect that you have on kids. And you won't know until 5, 10, 15 years later. When you get that letter or card in the mail or now an email, or a text, from somebody to say, to let you know the impact that you had on that student. But you don't know at the time that you're doing that. And that's part of part of your kind of core value system is you got to stand for something. You got to believe in something. You got to believe in what it is that you're doing. And if you do, those rewards will come later. But there is no immediate, sometimes there is no immediate gratification. Everybody thinks it's winning and losing, and it's not that. For the guys who really care about the industry and really care about what they're doing, they know it's much more than, X's and O's and winning and losing, which is great. Listen, we all want to win. We want to win a lot more than we lose, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, that's not what this is about, what we do.
Yeah, there's been just a tremendous, you've obviously had a string of just great players, but, obviously 2006, you have the Duke scandal, which was just awful. And, you were on the other end of it because you were dealing with it as a parent. And, Matt was on the team at the time. And right during that time, I was running the Long Island Lizards as president. And, we were right in the heart of all of it. But it just seemed, me having known you for as long as I have, it just seemed that you literally were the right person at the right time, that this is exactly what this program needed. They needed someone like you with your character to take it over. What was that like, taking over that program at that point in time?
Ironically, I did a podcast with Father Mike Martin here on campus with the Duke Catholic Center about 2 or 3 months ago. And I told this story, and I think the story is starting to grow legs with me. I think initially I didn't know if I believed it or not. But in 2006, when that was going on at Hofstra, we were having the best year, of our careers at Hofstra together. The players, the coaching staff, we had won 17 games in a row, and it wasn't enjoyable. It was hard to enjoy because of what was happening at Duke.
Sure.
And not only what was happening for my son, his friends, for the sport itself was getting a lot of bad publicity. And it was just, as you said, it was an awful time for all of us associated with lacrosse. And I used to stop at St. Killian's Church, which was right on Conklin over by where we live. And I would stop in and say a prayer or two, just wishing that it was over, that the guys could have their season back, that somebody would figure it out in Durham, and we could all move on. We could enjoy what we were doing at Hofstra. Those kids would get their lives back, and they could compete and play and go to school without, being harassed and so on. And it hit me that maybe there was a bigger plan here. Maybe there was something going on behind the scenes, that something bad had to happen for Mike Pressler and for those kids and those families, for something good to happen for me. And it's always I struggle with that at times, and I struggle that they had to suffer and they had to go through this thing, and we all did, different degrees, but we had to figure out how to get stronger on the other side. And it's kind of ironic.
Yeah, I've known Mike Pressler for a really long time. Mike recruited me when I was in college, and got to know Mike as a coach, and playing against him and stuff. And what an awful thing that he had to go through. But when he wrote his book, we had him do the book signing at a Long Island Lizards game, and just really proud of the way he handled that whole situation as well. But you came in. And now you're coaching your own son the next year. And not only just coaching your own son, but you're coaching one of the best players in the game. How much interaction did you actually have on the offensive side of the field with Matt?
Well, I was coaching the offense. At that time, we only had three coaches. It was myself and Kevin Cassis. Now, Kevin had only been coaching. He had 1 year at Stony Brook, and then that half truncated year at Duke.
Right.
So he only been around coaching for 1.5 years. Chris Gabrielli, who I really didn't know well, but I had hired him, from Butler, his Farmingdale guy, UMass, Farmingdale roots, and his dad went to Duke. So he had an emotional attachment, and it was really just the three of us. And so not only were we coaching new coaches, because none of us knew each other, but we were also, for Chris and I, coaching a whole group of new kids. And the positive was that Matt was a senior. We had some real high-end talent. We didn't have a lot of depth on that first team, because out of the 7 scholarship guys that were initially supposed to come to Duke, only 3 showed up. 4 of them decided that was a little bit too much for them. And so, we were a little bit shorthanded, but we had enough high-end talent that we were able to really trust those kids. And that first year we were more kind of like caretakers than we were. It was Mike's program. It was the seniors program. We wanted to make sure that we didn't screw them up.
Right.
Was really the goal. And because they had been to the national championship 2 years before as sophomores, as juniors, they lost most of their season. And so our job was just to almost manage the team, as opposed to coach the team.
It's an interesting way to really think about it, from really the management standpoint. And, Sometimes it's also you talk about leadership and letting those seniors kind of take over the leadership and run that team and close things out the way that they wanted to. So, you go from that in 2006 going to 2007. And here we are now in 2020, and we're dealing with a completely different situation where now you have a group of seniors that might have played their last game and didn't know that they were playing the last game. And, Jerry Burns, who's a good friend of mine, and Jerry really well as well. And Jerry's a head coach at Harvard. Jerry said, we always tell the kids, play like it's your last game. He goes, God, we didn't realize that was our last game. So how are you managing with the kids now, and how are they handling it?
Well, it's interesting because I remember saying to Coach Caputo before we played Jacksonville on Tuesday night, before this all on the 10th, before this all went down and I said to them, I remember saying to Ronnie, should I say to the guys, this might be your last game? And then I said, I probably shouldn't, because they might think that I know more than I did. And I didn't know much, but the way things were turning at that point, it seemed like something was going to go sideways in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, nah, don't say anything, so what we're doing is we meet every day at 3:00. We have a Zoom meeting with the team every day at 3, and we're trying to keep everyone connected. We would be practicing at 3:00 if we weren't meeting. So let's meet every day. Early on, I recognized I can't talk to them every day for an extended period. So we're bringing in guest speakers. We've had Dan Quinn, who's the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, who I coached with at Hofstra. We've had General Martin Dempsey, who was a former chief of staff under President Obama. He happens to teach a class here in our business school. We've had Admiral Jamie Sands, Rear Admiral Jamie Sands, who is up at the Great Lakes training area. Jamie I met while I was here at Duke. He was doing a fellowship, so I met him a couple of years ago. We've had a couple of our former players. We've had Jim Zelter, who works at the Apollo Fund up in New York City, and talking about leadership, in crisis and managing a group of 1,400 people. We've had Tony McDevitt here, who was played for us with Matt.
Love Tony.
Who's a partner at Brownstone. And Tony, there's 50 people, in his office. And so what is it like to manage a group of 50 people in this environment? And so we have Mike Catalino, who played for us. Mike is actually a neurosurgeon now. He's located up in Boston, and he's going to talk to the team on Friday about what he's experiencing. So we're trying to bring in as many people as we can from the military, medicine, business, athletic world, and looking for the themes. What are the things that everybody's learning about leadership, learning about character, humility, in their particular situations. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been really educational. And I tell you what, I've been taking a lot of notes, a lot more notes than I thought I would.
It's awesome, but once again, it just goes to show the type of leader that you are, knowing that, this is a great thing for your young men and your program to, have an opportunity to literally go outside the box. I want to bring up two things. You brought up military, and you brought in some military leaders, and it's something that you've been associated with for a long time with Jimmy Regan and the Lead the Way Fund. And what that's all about. Talk about that Duke, Jimmy Regan. I'm a Chaminade guy. I was forced to go to Chaminade. Didn't want to. I wanted to go to East Meadow. Begged for a year and a half. Mom said no. Really probably a good thing for me. But, having that Chaminade connection with Jimmy Regan and, with Chaminade, Manhasset, the game that they play every year, the high school game, all about, Reed's Rock. Talk a little bit about Jimmy Regan and what you guys do with the Duke program.
Well, it was my first year at Duke, and it was the spring of 2007 when Jimmy was killed. And, I was on an email chain with many of his peers, and it was incredible, the verbiage, that were coming out of that these guys were writing about Jimmy and about who he was and what he meant and how devastated the Duke lacrosse community was when that happened. And to be honest, I didn't know Jim. I didn't know his dad. I didn't know Jimmy. And then maybe a year or two later, his dad found a picture of Jimmy and I at a Hofstra summer camp, that I took a picture with him. And so all of a sudden, there was this connection on a lot of different levels. We've had a lot of Chaminade kids come through the program, and we have currently we have 3 now currently. And so we had that connection. We had the Duke Lacrosse connection. And then I had this other connection, of a young man who was, I don't know, maybe he was in 6th grade, when we took the picture. And Mr. Regan and, Jamie Brodsky and that whole crew have been relentless in their support of the Lead the Way Fund and keeping Jimmy's memory alive. And in fact, in 2013, when we after we won the national championship, we were invited to the White House, and it was a day event. But we thought it was appropriate that we visit Jimmy's grave at the Arlington National Cemetery, which was a very powerful moment. Actually, I'm sorry, it was 2010 we did that. It was a very powerful moment for all of us, that we were able to, to be, in that place at that time, and then be able to, really, kind of not reflect, but certainly, be part of that. And then, of course, Jimmy inspired Casey Carroll, was one of Casey Carroll's inspirations. Came, later, Casey, who was Matt's roommate freshman year, joined the Army. I mean, he joined the Army as an enlisted man, not in OCS, didn't want anybody to know about his Duke background. Talk about humility.
Right.
Becomes an Army Ranger and is assigned to Jimmy's regiment. Ironically, and served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, Jimmy's message and his legacy, is carried forward by not only, the lacrosse program, but guys like Casey. And it's been, it's been a wonderful relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Chaminade has also done an amazing job. When I was a student at Chaminade, they would hold the Gold Star masses, and about military people who had died, and Chaminade alumni, and it's always so powerful, and it's a great reflection to go there. We've had some of the people I looked up to, growing up across the street from the Rogan family. And, John Rogan went to Chaminade, who was a cousin, went and played at Yale, played the Jets. Tommy Rogan, one of my best friends. But Michael Rogan was a lacrosse player at UPenn, and junior year of UPenn, Mike Rogan tells his parents, he's like, I'm not going back to UPenn, I'm enlisting. And he did the same thing. He enlisted. And Mike's still in the Army today. And you look at people like this, and thank God for them. Thank God for their service to, keep our country safe. And these are people who literally were willing to put their lives on the line so that you and I have the safeties and the comforts that we have. And so I'm, really proud that you honor that whole, even with everything you have on the helmets, the Lead the Way on the helmets. I see it with the Duke, and it just always puts a smile on my face. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, lacrosse guys are very, we always say that lacrosse guys are different. I'm not saying better, but our guys are different. And I don't mean our guys, the Duke guys, I mean lacrosse guys in general. Right now, Danny Fowler, Chaminade grad, who played here with Duke.
Remember, I coached Danny. I was his goalie coach forever. So, I'd like to take a little credit for that.
All right. And then, and Matt Landis. And there's a third guy from Notre Dame. So 2 Notre Dame guys and a Duke guy are in the same OCS class in the Navy, and they're BUDS candidates. So the 3 of them are trying to become Navy SEALs. And so, the beat goes on. The values that our guys, lacrosse guys, hold are just a little bit different. It's their aspirations that, to do the right thing and just are really good people. The beat goes on everywhere in the lacrosse world.
You mentioned like the Fowlers, and so you've had 3 Fowlers, the Fowler brothers, and great family. Had the opportunity to literally work with all of them, and Brendan, I never thought I was going to be a 3-sport athlete in college, I wanted to be a two-sport athlete, and then went to Brown with the intentions of playing football and lacrosse, and then ended up wrestling for 2 years as well. But Brendan did it. I mean, back then I think it's virtually impossible to do it now. And Brendan was a three-sport athlete at Duke, where he wrestled, played football, and lacrosse.
Yep. It's not as hard as people think. I think the big thing is that people get either discouraged but if you're confident, Brendan lacks nothing in that regard.
You know that.
He walked onto the football team. We didn't know anything about Brendan up until May of his senior year in high school, when Coach Moran said to me, I had heard through the grapevine that their face-off guy had applied to Duke or was coming. And I said, hey, Jack, who is he? You think maybe you can have him give me a call? And, it started that relationship. But he walked on the football field. He played 2 years of football, broke his shoulder, his collarbone, in a playoff game against Syracuse. We beat Syracuse at home. And then we ended up playing Maryland in the semifinal. We advanced in the quarterfinals, but then in the semifinals, we played Maryland. We really didn't have a face-off guy per se. And, and we ended up losing. But so then he didn't play football his junior year. Danny came on to campus that his senior year, and Brendan wanted to be the captain. He wanted to be around in the fall. So, he chose to play, not play football. But actually, he did go back and play football his junior year. So after he was injured. So his senior year, though, and then his fifth year, he wrestles. So, I mean, incredible. And why not? You only live once.
Well, and you know what? I think the other thing, too, is I give you credit for that, too, is because, you didn't say no to him. Some coaches might say no. Dom Starsha never said no to me. He didn't say – the only thing he said, listen, what's going to happen – when wrestling season and lacrosse season go. And I'm like, lacrosse is my number one. So when wrestling comes in, lacrosse starts, I'm done with wrestling. And my coach was okay with that too in the wrestling team. So, that was the beauty of it. And it wasn't like I was good enough where I was going to Easterns or the NCAAs at all. So, it's. I mean, listen, we grew up in a time where we all played three sports in high school. Yep.
And we still recruit. We want the 2 and 3 sport athletes, kids who love to compete, kids who love to be coached, who love to be around friends, who make different groups of friends, in the different sports. And there's so much you get out of it, so much when you're involved. And you only go through life once, and to fail is fine. Embracing failure and learning from your mistakes and maybe a little bit of humility when you're not the best in one sport, but you're different in another sport. All those things are positive. Those are all positive experiences.
Well, I mean, we talk about it all the time. And, one of the things that we really look at is, you mentioned all these kids that, you've coached that are, going on, whether it's McDevitt, and they're now leaders and they're leading their own teams. It's like what we're learning on the field, the skills, and I'm talking about the life skills. I'm not talking about how to catch and throw. I'm talking about the life skills that you learn to compete, to be a good teammate, the grit, never giving up, all those things. They impact you in everything you do. And especially at a time like this, right now, where we're going through so much uncertainty, I think it's great for people to be able to hear from you. And even like, there might be some, young kid out there who says, hey, I want to play for Duke one day. What are the characteristics that kid's going to need in order for John Danowski to be interested in him?
And that's, and I think you just kind of hit them all. It's this number one is obviously the academic, throw out the academic piece, but it's high character. It's high character, it's values, it's standing for believing and standing for something, whatever that is. It's, the elements of hard work ethic you hear all the time, competitiveness, accountability, holding yourself accountable, holding teammates accountable,
right.
Passion, being open to coaching, being open to failure and learning from mistakes and moving on and, being, team oriented. And those are the things that we, when, the initial part of this conversation, I could tell you all my junior high and high school coaches. I could rattle them off right now in order. And every one of them complemented the next. The theme was always the same. It was always show up, work hard, be a great teammate, don't, nothing negative, have a great attitude. And it carried over from one sport to another. So whatever we heard in football, we heard the same thing on the basketball court.
Right.
And then when basketball season was over, the same message was being delivered, in lacrosse season. And then when you got home, it was the same message there. Don't get too big, don't get too, high on yourself, It was the same message. And so we couldn't help but think a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. One of my early coaches, I didn't, grow up. We didn't have youth lacrosse.
Nor did we.
The only youth program that was around at the time was Levittown Tomahawks, but I didn't play it. Some of my teammates at Chaminade did, but my first coach in 7th grade was Mickey Mena.
Sure.
And also I always said I was super lucky. I had amazing coaches, and not to name names, but I literally had amazing coaches through high school. And then the first really bad coaching experience I had was freshman year at Brown University. Was our head football coach, and he literally made me hate the game. And I always say, it's like, wow, I was very lucky that I had such good coaches all along, because if I only had really one bad one, I've been okay. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with different people anyhow. But, I had Anson Dorrance, the UNC women's soccer coach who's won 21 national championships, was on last week. And he was talking about the definition of a champion. He was telling the Mia Hamm story. And I said to him, what's interesting is I was coaching one day, and his story was related to you. I was coaching one day, like 5th or 6th graders up at Cold Spring Harbor. And I saw a kid doing wind sprints on his own. And I was watching him. I'm like, I can't believe how hard this kid's doing. So I went up and introduced myself. And that was the first time I ever met John Orson. And
Sure.
He told me he was playing for you, that he was just switching positions. And I remember calling you. And I'm like, John, there's this kid I just met who plays for you, John Orson. And you didn't even let me get the words out. And you said, that kid's going to be an All-American. He's going to be a captain for us this year. We switched his position, and this kid is an absolute animal, Dave. You can't wait to watch him. Now you see John's in the coaching ranks right now. And first chance I had to draft him in the Lizards, he was one of the first draft picks that I took, because he was that character guy.
He when I tell you what, he's one of my favorite of all times. And when John, when he first got out of college, he used to come and sit in the office, and he was one of those guys. He would come up to the office over at Hofstra. He would sit down, and we would look at him and say, John, what's up? Do you need anything? And he'd go, no. He just wanted to sit in the office. He wanted to be around coaches and be around. And so when he graduates, I said to him, listen, man, you got to coach, man. And when I came down to Duke, I said, come on, let's go. Come on down, be the volunteer. And he just had this thing. He had to get out of the system. He had to go to New York City. He had to work a little bit. He had to find out what Wall Street was or wasn't for him. And then Joe Amplo, who was in the office next to me where he used to sit down, got him to go out to Marquette to coach, and the rest is history. He's gone to Denver, and now he's back with Joe, reunited at the Naval Academy. But John had it. John, is a freshman, we lost to Cornell his freshman year by a goal at Hofstra, and John stood up in the locker room after the game and just was so angry and held all the guys around him responsible. And as a freshman, he was not afraid. He didn't like losing, and just was just a pleasure to be around.
Yeah, absolute competitor. 2010, the first year you guys break through and you win it in overtime in crazy fashion. And once again, it's like you're letting kids play the game the way that they're supposed to be played, and you're putting a long pole CJ Costabile to face off, and letting him shoot whenever he wants. And he literally wins the opening face-off in overtime, goes down and scores in 5 or 6 seconds, whatever it was. You win the national championship for the first time. What's the first thing that goes through your head when you realize you just won a national championship?
Two things I remember thinking after the game. Number one is, well, we always told the kids, we learned a long time ago with Hofstra, you play to win in overtime. You just cannot be, you can never be on your heels. You can never hesitate. You can never think, should I or shouldn't I? Make the play. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But don't hesitate. But after the game, I thought about two things. I thought about all the great coaches that I've been with. I thought about Rich Donovan. I thought about Wayne Ament, Ernie Olson, assistant coaches, who did an unbelievable job that I got to work with, who don't get a chance at this, who don't get a chance to I just happen to be in the right circumstance. There are guys who do, wonderful work coaching, but we have certain advantages here, that allow us to get to the Final Four. It doesn't mean that if you're coaching at Vermont or, I'm not picking on Vermont, but, there's certain those guys can do an unbelievable job of coaching, for their kids, and they just don't have the advantages that we do. And that's the first thing that I thought of. The second thing I thought of was, all right, who do we play next? Because you don't want it to end there. You want it to keep going. You want to be with these kids. You've been practicing. You've been in a hotel for like 4 nights in a row, and team meetings and meals, and you're eating 3 meals together with them. You're having team meetings, and you don't want it to end. And you're just kind of looking around for the next opponent.
That's awesome. And then you go back and 2013, you win it again in 2013. You won your first 3 games by a total of 4 goals in 2013. So nail biters. And then, you break through with the big win in against Syracuse in the championship game. And Brendan Fowler's named MVP. He had just a monster tournament. So now you win it a second time. And what's that feeling like?
You recognize that now you're starting to get a little bit of experience in the tournament, obviously, at that point. And you recognize that sometimes, man, the breaks just kind of go your way. We beat Notre Dame that year, and, we made 2 saves, and we advanced. Dave Lawson puts the team on his back, out in Indianapolis, and he scores 5 goals. And, he just has a breakout, he has a breakout day. And it's, we never count on any one guy, but that one guy on that particular day, makes plays. We didn't have a great day in the goal, but we make one particular save where we catch it clean, we get it out, we play transition, we make like 3 passes and score a goal off that save. And you just, it's just kids making plays. And sometimes you make one less. That particular day we made 1 more. But I think about, in that year, I think about that. And I also think about, we were down to Syracuse like 6-1 early in the game. And I remember thinking, well, it was a good run. I wasn't thinking necessarily come back or, hey, we're playing Syracuse. They have a great history. They're hot. They're playing really well. But once again, Brendan Fowler making plays, winning. We were winning faceoffs and losing 6-1.
Yeah.
And, all of a sudden, it's one play, it's literally one play at a time. And you end up running away with it. But, at the time you're thinking, I don't know. I'm not sure about this. And so every game has its own, every season has its own story, and every game has its own story.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, when you're down 6-1, I remember Jimmy Muley, who another East Meadow guy, and Jimmy and I have been best friends since we were in 2nd grade. Although I do have to go publicly and just remind Jimmy that it was he who lost the Soccer Pepper Championship in 2nd grade when he was the goalie and I was the shooter. We made it to the Long Island Finals because I scored all my goals. So I just want to make sure Jimmy remembers that.
Nice.
We were soccer players together. But,
sure.
But Jimmy said after a Lizards game one time, he said, someone once said to me, he goes, you're never as good as you think you are when you win, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you're losing. And as coaches, you go through those highs and the lows. You're like, there's times where you're down 4-0 in a game, and you're like, are we going to score today?
Right.
We actually going to are we gonna get one goal? And so I know what you're going through with that. So you win it again in 2014, back to back, and then the next thing, they say next level for you is you get announced as the head coach for Team USA. Come on, that's just got to be icing on the cake like you can't imagine. What was that feeling like?
Well, I had applied for it the year, in four, I guess in 13 or 12, whatever it was, didn't get it, which was fine. But I wanted to see if what, the way we look at the game, the way we look at the sport, would it carry over, to working with the best players, literally the best players in the world. And the other part I was very curious, how is this going to make me a better coach? I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be around guys who, excel at the highest level, and what is it that they do and what separates them. And so, and for us, when we got the job, the first thing was to try to figure out who do you want to work with. And I wanted to work with guys that I trusted, guys that I knew and trusted. Joe Amplo was one of the first people I thought of. I think the world of Joe and what he's done at Marquette and now, at the time, and then now at Navy, Seth Tierney was really interested. And so reconnecting with Seth, because they were both my assistants at Hofstra. And then Tony Resch,
and Seth's wife, Maureen, she and I went to East Meadow together. We grew up together. We were literally right around the corner from one another. So another East Meadow connection.
Lacrosse, we're very incestuous in our sport. And Tony Resch turned out to be and is one of the finest men I have ever met in my life. A Yale grad,
Tony's coached everything. That's like the amazing thing about Tony. Whether it be outdoor, indoor, he's literally coached everything. And
humble.
You don't hear anything bad about Tony.
Oh, thoughtful, insightful. I mean, it was an unbelievable staff. And then Ben DeLuca was kind of like our assistant general manager, and Ben had worked with me at Duke, and so I just had this wonderful rapport with these guys. And it was really important for the coaching staff to have great chemistry so the players could see that chemistry was going to be a really important part of our, of building that team.
Right. Last about a week and a half ago, we had Ross Greenburg on. Ross is the former president of HBO Sports and probably one of the best sports storytellers there is. He's like literally the epitome of documentaries. If you name a sports documentary, Ross has probably had his hand in it. And the one he's most famous for is Miracle. And, when we were talking off the air, one of the things he was talking about was when they were talking about with Herb Brooks, it was just all about chemistry. Can we find the right chemistry in this team? And that's what they needed. And boy, isn't that like one of the best parts of the story of Miracle is how Herb Brooks was able to get them together and then get the most out of them. And that's your job as a coach.
And that was our goal. I mean, listen, we stole a little bit, we wanted to have this standing team kind of like, USA basketball has, where we had this roster. So when we started 2.5 years ahead, we had probably 12 guys in that January session down at the IMG Academy end up making the team or run the travel team. And out of those guys, it was, we had sons of coaches. We had guys who were brothers. We had guys who played together in high school and college. We had guys, who were related. I mean, it was this really neat chemistry. But at the end of the day, it had to be about selflessness. It had to be, and if you look at the last game, that Rob Pennell, who played flawlessly in that game, he had 1 assist. He probably had 3 second assists where he drew a double and moved the ball.
Hockey assist.
Yep. Ryan Brown, I think he scored maybe 3 goals, but the stick was, ball was in his stick for 4 seconds because it was in his stick is out. You didn't have to dodge. Rob would draw 2, move it. Everybody just needed to make the plays that were in front of them. And if you ask them, they didn't care about their points. They didn't care. It was about winning. It was about the group of right guys, of the right guys,
Well, that's the beautiful thing is like, Rob Pennell, he does all the dirty work, does all those other little things. And, he only has 1 assist, but if you ask Rob Pennell, what would he rather have? Would he rather have 7 points in the game or win a world championship? It's not even going to be a doubt. Rob Pennell is going to go championship, period, the end.
And that was the important part of that. The important part of, listen, as well as anybody that you could have 60 guys can make that team.
Sure.
But it's got to be the 23 right guys. We needed guys, attackmen, who could play midfield because, you were playing 7 games in 9 days in the heat in the Middle East. So, you needed depth. You needed middies who could maybe play D midfield if somebody went down. Because once the tournament begins, there are no substitutions. You can't bring in – if somebody gets hurt, when Jack Kelly tore his knee against Australia, we had 1 goalie. That's it. If John Galloway had gotten hurt after that and couldn't play, man, we were going to play without a goalie. Somebody would have jumped in there physically, but we would have not had a goalie. We needed defensemen who could play LSMs. We needed, we had LSMs, who could pick up a short stick.
Jack Kelly was also playing out of his mind.
He had a great summer. And he might have been the starting goalie, for the playoffs at the end. I mean, he could have beaten John out. We were prepared to take a look at that. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way.
And John, now, is that another reason that you create that relationship? And now you're like, hey, let's play each other, Duke versus Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah. Well, John also was our volunteer here. And, it's a bus ride for Jacksonville, in terms of budgets, and we're very budget conscious. And, I'll do anything to help out those new programs, which I think is our responsibility as an older established program, that we need to help the younger coaches and we need to help the younger programs. It's good for Jacksonville to have Duke on their schedule.
I'm so glad you said that because it's crazy. You read some of the lacrosse forums and some people will sit there and say, why is Duke playing these teams early in the season? They're crazy to play some of these teams early in the season, but you just said it, you just gave the reason why. And
it is our responsibility to, otherwise, if we're just going to play each other, the sport's never going to grow. Right. We went out to Cleveland State a couple of years ago. We went to Marquette the first year, played in front of 4,000 people in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Right. I mean, it was a thrill for me, as a Long Island kid, bringing the game to Wisconsin. But that was important for Joe to show his administration, to show the community that, hey, lacrosse is going to be a big deal here on campus. Right. If we don't do that, especially now after the pandemic, once, athletic departments start evaluating, their departments, you're going to take a look and say, do we need lacrosse? If we're going to drop something, how do we save $1 million? Well, easily, you can drop lacrosse. And so, again, it's important for us to take care of one another.
Yeah, sure. It just adds value. And, you see obviously with the expansion and, Denver being as good as they are. I had the opportunity to watch you guys, I think 2 years ago when you played Denver on a Friday night at Duke. Just an incredible game. And we also have just a lot of other connections, obviously, Cam Muley coming to Duke and Jimmy and I being really good friends. And
sure.
Then, you coaching one of my other really good friends, my Brown teammate, Tim Manown, his son, Joey Manown, sure. And having that connection, the Fowlers, and now Bonafide, and I used to coach him when he was little, and it's great seeing all those connections. But one thing I wanted to talk about as well is I watch your demeanor as a coach, and the one thing I love about you is, and maybe it's just my perception of it, I feel you do so much more coaching when something either goes wrong or something's not going right. That's like, yeah, you get excited when you score a goal, but when someone comes up the field, I just love how you literally go right over to them and you're having this like one-on-one coaching moment with them. And it's that valuing that, hey, go out and go make the next play. Talk about that, about, encouraging kids to make mistakes. Well,
I think one of the things about our sport, like if you coach football, you got 4 seconds, right? 4 or 5 seconds, things are happening, and there's this, and then you rest, and then you go do it again. But in our sport, it's incredibly spontaneous. I don't know if anybody's ever researched the number of plays, let's say an attackman is involved with over the course of a game, or a defenseman, and so there's so many opportunities. Monday through Friday, the kids have earned the right to play or not play. Some kids are just better than others, and they've earned that right, whether it's their talent, their chemistry, their experience, whatever that is. And so we don't want them looking over their shoulder thinking, geez, if I make a mistake, I'm going to get pulled, And so it's, listen, man, we believe in you. Here's what we want you to think about for next time. Or maybe you didn't see this, or you didn't see a situation. And that's our job. Our job is to correct, support, sometimes get in their face, if we need to do that, try to do that, we try to save that for when it needs to be effective.
Sure.
You can't do that constantly.
Can't do it every time.
Kids are going to turn you off, if you're constantly doing that. But when you get angry, then they'll respect that too. As long as they know that you love them, and that's the key. But it's, the fun of it, to me, the fun of it is, is that's our impact. And we have and the other part of it, game day, our impact is Monday through Friday. It's their game on Saturday. Our job is just to, help them along, but, hopefully that we're doing right by them Monday through Friday.
Yeah, I just love it though, because the other thing too is like, listen, sometimes you've taken your lumps in the early part of the season in February and March, and you have a couple losses going in. But I always say this. I said, but Duke's going to be in the Final Four. You know what? They do an unbelievable job, but Duke's going to be in the Final Four, because it's what you're able to do and help those kids along the way and learn from those mistakes. And now you have, two kids coaching. You have, Matt coaching with you and your daughter's coaching at Bethpage High School, following in Dad's footsteps.
Well, actually, they're following their grandfather's footsteps,
okay.
and their uncle's footsteps. My dad coached, my brother coached. It's, it's just incredibly rewarding. It's, when we started coaching, when I was the head coach at Post, I was making $4,000, and I made $6,000 as the area coordinator in the dorm. So we had $10,000. We were, newly married, and we got 2 meal cards. So, when school was in session, we didn't have to cook. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner when school was in session, only. But, none of us did it. None of us who got involved early ever did this for the money. When I went to Hofstra, it was $6,000. The irony of moving from going from Post to Hofstra was it was part-time. Now, if it was a full-time job, I never would have gotten that job because there was a ton of men that would have applied and who had much better credentials than I did at the time. So, you got to be a little bit lucky, the right place, right time. But I think the kids have watched the relationships that we formed over the years. They've watched, the value of teaching and the fun. It's fun.
Absolutely.
It's not, I don't know what it's like to go to an office and sit at a desk, but yeah, man, what we do is fun. Absolutely.
It's awesome. So listen, you've been unbelievable, and we're gonna wrap this up. We always wrap it up with a few remaining questions. So the first question is, you kind of answered it already, but I have to give her credit because she asked the question. Kelly Nascimento DeLuca, who is the daughter of Pele, she just did a documentary called Warriors of a Beautiful Game about women's soccer and the fight for equality for women's sports. And her question to you was, besides talent, what's the one thing you look for most in that makes those great players that stand out? Like, what is that one thing that really makes them stand out?
There is that drive, we call them thoroughbreds. There is that drive that they have this belief in themselves and they love to compete. They love to compete, whatever it is.
Checkers, fire.
But they have that fire it's just really important to them. And the great ones have that.
Yeah, That's awesome. Now, next thing is our next guest, who you know our next guest, you know him personally. On Wednesday, we have Greg Dale. Greg Dale is the
Sure.
head of sports psychology at Duke University. And he also is a professor, and he teaches the Leadership Academy there. What's the question that you want me to ask Greg Dale on Wednesday?
I'm going to say that Greg is unbelievable, right? He has lectured, I found this out the other day, in all 50 states, you know, besides for all over the world. But he's traveled to all 50 states and done his thing. I mean, it's an incredible, you know, he has this incredible umbrella. You know, I'm just so impressed with him. I would ask Greg.
To fish, by the way. He loves to fish. So I told him when he comes to Long Island, he and I are going to do a little striped bass fishing together.
Nice. I would say this. Ask him what percentage of coaches along the way that he's met get it. You know what I mean?
I love it.
Yeah, what percentage of coaches, like, I'd be curious, like, you know, is it 50%? Is it 10%? Is it 90%? You know, but I'd be curious.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, for me, I know I've completely changed how I coach, and the biggest, the one tool that I always say is Positive Coaching Alliance. It literally changed how I coach. I love the Positive Coaching Alliance. I can't say enough good things about them. It's just awesome. But the last question we have for you to wrap it up is, because the Elevate Academy really is. This is a place for people who love sports to come to learn, hear things from different people. What's the single best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and who gave it to you?
Wow. Great question. You know, I think the single best piece of advice is probably from wow. My Rolodex here is flipping through.
Sure, you
I had a gym teacher, a woman, Miss Cornelius, 5th grade, 6th grade. And she just, you know, I think you mentioned it before, she saw something in me. And she said, you know, I'm going to be following you because you have, you know, and she wasn't talking about, I don't think she was talking about talent, but I think at some point she was talking about, you know, you got your values, or, you know, you try to be nice, you try to be kind to the other students, you know, teamwork is important to you. Even at that age, you know, I kind of knew that, you know, being part of the team was greater than individual. And I still wanted to be good, you know, what I did. But, you know, she saw something in me that by her just saying something, and I don't even remember exactly what it was, that was enough.
Right. That's awesome.
You know, that was enough.
Yeah.
You know, at that point in my life.
Especially right now with what's going on. I was listening to a podcast with Brendan Bouchard, and one of the things that Brendan Bouchard said is, one thing we could all be doing right now, send out 5 messages a day to someone that you really care about to let them know you're just thinking about them. And,
sure.
You know, it's something that we could do, and we got to keep elevating each other and helping each other during these times. But Coach, you've helped me, you know, throughout the years as just as a mentor and someone I look up to. But you've done an unbelievable job. You've won at the biggest stages. And most importantly is the impact that you are having on these student athletes that come under you. You're seeing it. You see it. And Doug Altmansberger told me to say hello. He said he had to work and he couldn't be here, but he told me to say hello to you. So Dougie says hello. But Coach D, thank you so much for joining us here on the Elevate Academy. Keep doing what you do. You're unbelievable at it, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the time today. I had a blast, and anytime.
Thanks
Dave,
so much.
See you soon, man.
Talk to you soon.
Keep up the great work.
See you soon. Thanks, bud.
All right, man. See you, brother.